Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another really awesome prototype to share with you from the brand RZE. Now, this branding might look familiar to you guys if you've watched the channel before. They originally were under a different brand name, but RZE is what they are now. If you guys check out the channel history, you'll see it under kind of this RZE name, which was German for traveling or voyage. Now, they're basically a new micro brand upstart. The founder was a key designer from a very popular micro brand before, and they've definitely set out to kind of make something on his own and create a new vision from the ground up. Now, the brand name is a German word, at least the inspiration behind it and kind of how it started. And it was pretty much inspired by his own personal Zen U1 with its clean and simple lines and scratch resistance. The translation also symbolizes moving forward. And in that case, they've really bounded forward with this new model. It's actually a pilot's watch, some key common characteristics and design language. And you're looking for a pilot's watch, it's basically going to be that balance of legibility and functionality. This is their Fortitude prototype. And let's just face it, guys, this thing is pretty stunning. In terms of the build quality, in terms of the execution, the theme. I mean, they've really grown leaps and bounds from the kind of more simple watches that they've put out in the past, which have been real hits in my eyes. They've been really fantastic, but this really just elevates kind of what they're doing to another level. They would kind of consider this their definitive aviation timepiece, and it's definitely built to withstand the rigors of tactical missions and training while looking stylish and remaining comfortable while you do it. The watch does boast an anti-magnetic case paired with RZE's signature Ultra Hex coating, which is fantastic, and it's tested up to 1200 hardness vigors, which is great. The watch, the case has this really not just the case of the movement in the watch, but the actual case that it's made out of is actually made out of this upcycled tarpon material, and it's kind of a combination of woven laminate fabric that's also water resistant and corrosion resistant, as well as abrasion resistant and extremely durable. Now, this piece is actually going to be released in December, and it's going to come out at $459 and then move up to $599 in January of 2022. It's pretty slick, guys, I have to say. So I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you guys. Thanks to RZE for letting me spend a little bit of time with this prototype. I'm really looking forward to seeing the production models when they are ready. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, as you can see, very handsome watch. Previously, what we've seen from this brand is going to be matte blasted, which is a great aesthetic, very tool-like, but here you're seeing really fine brushing, and then it also still does have that Ultra Hex coating, which does add durability to keep this finish looking quite pristine. Now, in terms of the dimensions, it's 41 millimeters, which I think is great for a pilot's watch. Again, this is really a purpose-built pilot's watch. This isn't meant to be kind of crossover too hardcore into like an everyday style of watch. It really is a pilot's watch, and it wants to be, and it really is making an effort to fit within that space. It's only 12.45 millimeters thick, which isn't super thick, not super thin. I think it's really well balanced, which is really nice as well. And then, also, did I forget to mention this thing is made out of titanium? So it's actually really, really light and I mean, this thing feels amazing on the skin. And then even with that coating over it, there's just something really special and refined about this feeling. And I've really been excited to see more and more brands get into using the material of titanium. Of course, for me, being a big fan of everyday carry, pocket knives, and really nice, fine crafted pens, it's really great to see this material used in new and unique ways, and really in refined ways within the wristwatch market. So this is grade 2 titanium with that brushed finish and the ultra hex coating. The lug to lug on here is 48 millimeters, but it of course does have female end links, so it's not going to protrude anymore. If anything, it probably stops a little bit short if you look at how much this thing actually wraps and the way that everything lays. This is all individually articulated here, as you can see. So it's 3 links and they're all articulated. It's not like they're 3 links kind of just bonded together, which is pretty typical, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it is nice to see that full articulation. It does definitely help when it comes to how comfortable this thing is going to wear. And then at the end of the day, of course, this is meant to be something that comes with you, that you wear, that can be up to the rigors, as well as, comfortable while you're doing it and looking good, which I think they did a wonderful job with. The crystal is a flat sapphire with inner AR coating. They call it super AR because it's really 10 to 12 coatings of AR, which is great. So that anti-reflective coating does help you enjoy that texture on that dial. So this is very, very legible, which I find fantastic. Now, in terms of the bezel and the crown, you're going to get this nice fixed bezel with this turbine themed knurling, which is fantastic. Very reminiscent of the Oris Big Crown Pro Pilot, and you are getting a big crown as well. So I would say, although the watch is definitely quite original, that is where I do see definite design inspiration tying into that kind of aviation facet in the same way that it does with the Oris, of course, but this watch costs a lot less, which is great. And one of the reasons why it costs less, and although you can't see it behind this solid case back, is because it is actually housing Seiko's NH35 movement. Now, for some of you, that is not an issue at all. And I think at this price range, it really shouldn't be an issue. Even at full retail, it's going to be just a hair under $600. And there's definitely $600 Seikos that have 4R based movements. And the NH35 is essentially Seiko's non-proprietary kind of what they sell out. In terms of their movements that you can purchase to other manufacturers. So there's a lot of, pluses, and I know everybody kind of thinks of this movement as more of a base, like, hey, you get hacking and hand winding, so you kind of expect to see it in cheaper watches. And at $459 for that December release price, I think that's nothing to really sneeze at. I will say that the rest of the watch is so nice. It does almost make me wish that they did offer a higher end movement, just honestly because holy smokes. I really enjoy Seikos. You guys know I'm a Seiko collector, Seiko enthusiast. So I definitely see the value of having something like a Seiko movement, but this thing is just so nice. It almost just makes you wish that they would have maybe went with a higher beat Miyota movement, or maybe even instead of a Seiko NH, maybe you go to an NE, you get a longer power reserve if it would have been an NE15, but those things do increase cost. I think this case is so nice that if they would have put a Sellita, SW200, SW300, or an ETA 2892 or ETA 2824, I think honestly it still holds up, and that's my honest opinion in terms of how good this thing feels in hand, on wrist, and really just in the metal in general when you look at the finishing and the execution of this piece. Now, in terms of that solid case back, of course, titanium, so great on the skin. It is screw down with a Viton gasket, which is fantastic. You also, in terms of this dial, which is really quite handsome and very legible, and it does have quite a good bit of information there for you to keep track of, which definitely ties into the functional, kind of that function meets form aspect. Looks really fantastic. You have that matte sand textured dial. You have the sandwich cutout indices, painted and loomed hands, and then they're actually using Swiss Superluminova BGW9 grade A, and that it will be for the production unit. I want to say that they might be using it within this particular prototype, but I can't confirm for sure. We'll definitely get into loom shots and take a closer look at that point. Water resistant, up to 100 meters. It does have a big screw down crown there, which is fantastic. And one thing I do want to show, a really nice detail of the screw down crown is it has this really great collar there, and it's red, right? How cool is that? I was just, it's such a nice little detail there, that you just typically don't see. And it's one of those things I did want to share with you guys, because I thought that little splash of color, it just goes to show that they're thinking about the way you're going to interact with the timepiece, not just the way that it looks on your wrist. They understand that there will be, manual hand winding and whatnot, but also when that crown is out, right, by having that screw down crown, you know that when there's no red, that you're totally fine in terms of water resistance. And if you see it unscrewed and you see that red collar and it's sticking out like that, hey, it's a warning. Hey, you're in the red. Don't take this thing into any water. Don't submerge it. So as somebody who does take watches into water, as well as when I'm just doing basic maintenance and cleaning, it's really nice to have something like that. So very well thought out from that perspective, and honestly it's really great in terms of kind of the tactile experience with having nice purchase on the crown, and just being able to utilize it and actuate is very, very nice and strong from that perspective. Now the bracelet, to get into more details, you're getting a 20 millimeter lug width, solid titanium links and end links, and then you also are getting screw in connecting pins, which is fantastic, and many people they hope for and push for, so no expenses spared from that standpoint. It does taper down from 20 down to 16, so a very refined look, as you can see. When this lays on the wrist, it definitely doesn't appear, super overly chunky or anything like that, which is nice. And then when it comes to the bracelet clasp, this is actually stainless steel, but it also does have that ultra hex coating, so it actually flows really nicely, and it is fully milled. And you do have the push button and the flip lock there, as well as all of these manual adjustments. So with all of that said, let's go ahead, get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7 1/4 inch wrist, this thing really wears quite perfectly. Again, it's not meant to, kind of be a Rolex Explorer. This isn't some, go anywhere, dress up type of 36 to 39 millimeter affair. This definitely is a purpose-built pilot's watch, which means you are going to have that expansive dial with a lot of information to track that is ultimately legible, and you really are getting that. Although I will say it is quite refined, so it's not like some old Flieger style or anything like that, where it's going to be a very particular aesthetic. It's actually really quite handsome as just a sports watch in general. Wears really nicely. Man, look at those contours on this case. Now, you're not getting a lot of high polishing or anything like that. It's all brushed, but you can see the lines and tapering, and there's still some really fine case contours there that are just fantastic and are really nice to look at. I do love kind of the contrast between the case having some of those hard edges there, and then you look at the bracelet, overall very angular but very rounded, which does help with in terms of wearability. My wrist is about 7 1/4 inches, on the wrist bone, and above the wrist bone I wear it, I'd say it's probably closer to 7.5, and this thing wears really nicely. Of course, even when I get up close here, there's a little bit of lens distortion. It doesn't really appear oversized, to me, but of course, once you get it away from the lens there, away from kind of wristy length, you can see that it does fit really quite well, very balanced, and quite harmonious on the wrist. I mean, this thing, the fact that it's titanium and feels this good and looks this good, for me is just an absolute triumph. From RZE, it feels ultra premium. I have to say, it just gives me that vibe, that honestly I get from more expensive timepieces. So I really dig that they were able to kind of jump out of a very minimalist, very functional aesthetic and really kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to something that's a little bit more upscale. I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot more upscale, with some refinements that just tie into the DNA of this very young brand. So with all that said, let's go ahead, get it off the wrist and get going with some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh, wow. As you can see, that BGW9 is looking quite fantastic. I love how legible this is, and it just stands out. I like that it looks good in the dark. It looks good in the light. So let's go ahead and see how it looks in less than optimal lighting and transitional lighting, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you'll be coming in and out of the building, walking underneath overhangs, underneath the shade of a tree, or maybe just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it is nice to see how the different textures and finishings will render in less than optimal lighting. Even some harsher lighting, as you can see here, very high contrast, which typically will reveal any type of imperfections. You can see this looks absolutely flawless. Look at the way that the light slides over the brushing on those individually contoured and articulated links there. Really beautiful. And then that dial, that grainy texture just holds and plays with the light in really different and interesting ways. You can see here, really completely blacked out. And then boom, you get an idea of some of that grain there. And it does give you other hints of kind of charcoal colors there versus just the standard black, but it does render very, very dark most often. So this is going to be something very high contrast. Typically you're getting the really bright whites and then the really, really deep and dark black colors as well. And then of course all wrapped in a really, really handsome titanium case. I'm really blown away. Honestly, at the beginning of the review, I kind of forgot that this thing was titanium because of just how fine the brushing and everything renders. I'll say even, from other watches in my collection, this prototype has left an impression with me in terms of how nice a titanium watch can be and how much it can feel very close to steel in terms of the look and the aesthetic, which I think most people generally prefer. But while still getting all of the benefits of titanium as a material in terms of the weight and then, of course, the strength that comes with it and everything. So very cool, feels very high tech again, and very premium, which is always a bonus. Now on the wrist, in terms of closing thoughts here, it's just a really dialed in pilot's watch. That scale, I feel, hits really, really nicely. Some people, oh, I wish it was a little bit smaller, this and that. That's great. It would be cool in a smaller scale as well. But I think because of the details and the dial and the way that it's laid out, it really is kind of within that sweet spot here at this 41 millimeter scale. It does maximize the legibility with that size, which is fantastic. I think they would have to really simplify the dial to make it smaller, which would also make it, I think, a little bit less unique. So I'm a big fan of this particular size. And of course the refinements that kind of all plug into that. Now in terms of model variants, definitely check their site for current availability. This is currently tracking for December 13th of 2021 release, depending on when you're watching this. In terms of comparable models, of course, this reminds me a lot of my Oris Big Crown Pro Pilot. But it also has a lot of touches from their premium in-house Pro Pilot, like that crazy skeleton, like 10-day power reserve model, which is really nice and it's a cool watch, but this is at a much more wearable scale, which I can definitely appreciate. So this is definitely, although a full-sized pilot's watch, I consider it's not an oversized pilot's watch. It's not, some big, huge statement piece. It definitely has a more subdued and understated attitude about it, but it's really draws you in more so when it comes to some of the refinements and those fine details, which I can really appreciate. So for me, guys, bottom line, RZE continue to strengthen their place within the modern tool watch space with pieces that offer robust capabilities at an affordable price point, and this is absolutely that. Again, it's almost so good that that's where it creates its shortcomings. It's so nice from the outside that it almost makes you wish that it was sold for more with a more expensive movement, just because it's that good at everything else. And to others, this was the perfect sweet spot, because they're like, hey, I don't really care about all the other movement mumbo jumbo. Just give me a mechanical movement that hacks and hand winds and easily serviceable. And then, yeah, I pile on every other detail and specification and function and benefit, and let me get it at under $500 really quick at $459 within that kind of early release price, and then at $599, just under $600. I still think it's a very strong value proposition even at that range. So we'll see in terms of future releases, but I really am excited to see this particular Fortitude line and how it continues to scale, grow, and evolve, because this is an outstanding starting point. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.